You are listening to Bridging the Gap, the podcast where we talk about businesses going global with the help of localization.
Stay put to meet the marketing, product, and software experts that make brands international.
And learn strategies to speak your customer's language. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Bridging the Gap podcast. I'm your host, Marta Coloma. In today's conversation, we're going to dip our toes into the concept of localization culture. What does it mean to foster a localization-friendly culture within your company? What are the benefits of doing so? And most importantly, how can you do it effectively? For that, we have two special guests today. The first one is Michal Kessel. She's a localization consultant and UX specialist. Hello, Michal. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I am, like you said, a localization consultant, and I'm a UX writer as well. So I create content for digital products, for digital interfaces. And what I specialize most is about creating experiences that have the same impact and have the same quality as they do in the source content. So a lot of the times we create experiences in English, and then once we start translating them or localizing them to other markets, the quality of the experience is not as good. And so what I mostly focus on is how we can create an experience that matches that same kind of level of quality and creates that same impact in any other market that we have. And I do that by teaching and by talking a lot about this, talking with a lot of other industry experts, and just generally sharing knowledge about user experiences in general and localizing user experiences specifically. And that's it, I guess. I do that in Localization Station, which is a website that's really focused on international user experiences. There's a lot of knowledge there and a lot of tips and a lot of articles that anyone can use to kind of start improving their own localized experiences if they want to do that. That's it.
And our other guest is Kelly Murphy from the German company Pentland Firth. Hello, Kelly. Can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do?
Yes, as you mentioned, we are a software company based in Germany. We originally started off as software consultants, and now our main focus is the Easy Shopper, which you can see in the background right here. It is a smart shopping cart, and the whole idea is that you offer customers a whole experience behind grocery shopping. So to turn your everyday task of shopping, getting your groceries done, into an experience. You just scan your items, you put them into the cart. As you can see, it's open, so you bring your bags or your basket, you put the item in there, and I will go into some more features we might have later, but you just scan it in, put it in, and then you just pay and you're good to go. So the whole idea is that you don't have to put your items in the basket, put it on the conveyor belt at the checkout, pay, put it all back in there. You skip that whole process. Once it's in there, you just take it out, load it into your car, and go home. And it's just as simple as that. So that's what we do. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we are going to start with the basics. In case anyone here is a little lost, Michal, can you tell us a little bit what is localization and how is it different from translation? Because people usually confuse both concepts.
Sure. I think the definitions vary. People would define this kind of differently. But the way I see it, localization is kind of a level up from translation. So if you do translation, you have your content in another language. It's just as simple as that. So you create the same thing that you have, you just kind of transform it into a different language. But when you do localization, you are actually taking an extra step, making more of an effort to make sure that your users or your customers in that second language and third and whatever get the same level of experience and that it feels natural to them. So not just that they get the same experience as you would in maybe the United States, but also that this experience would feel like it was created for German users or for French users. And that can be done in different ways. So it's also about creating content in French or in German or any other language, but also about creating imagery and adapting kind of the layout sometimes so that it feels more natural, or even sometimes launching different features for different markets so that they would feel more adapted to that specific audience and what they need. So that's localization for me in a nutshell. And at the end of the day, you have to work together. Like every part of the company, every role in the company has to work together to make sure that you provide that level of experience to your localized users. So it's not just something that you can do inside the translation department, just create the content and send it out. You have to work with the product and marketing and sales and anyone else you have in the company that's focused on the product and launching the product so that you can actually create that level of experience. So it's a shared goal, I think.
Mm-hmm. We will get into this in a minute. But first, I also wanted to ask you, Michal, if you can just walk us through the benefits of localization, because people usually think that, the most obvious one is you are going to expand and you're going to connect better with customers. But are there any other benefits that you would like to mention?
To answer that, I want to walk you a little bit back to kind of the point of UX in general, because when we create a user experience, we do that to serve a certain goal. Sometimes it's to connect emotionally with our users. Sometimes it's to make life easier for them, to provide a more streamlined experience for them in a specific market, a specific product. And so once we localize the product and we do it well, rather than just translate it, we make sure that the localized product serves that same goal in a better way. The benefits vary because the products vary and the companies have different approaches and different goals. But the general point of it is that when you do it well, then your localized product would serve those goals better. And of course, when an experience feels more fluent and when it feels more adapted to that market, it creates a better connection and people want to keep using it and recommend it. There's better retention. So all of those business benefits that you get by just creating good experiences, you get them again by localizing well. So it's an effort, but it's definitely worthwhile at the end.
Mm-hmm, certainly. Kelly, I wanted to ask you to chime in about this concept. Did you know what was the difference between localization and translation before you made the decision at Pentland Firth to localize? And have you seen these benefits already?
When I initially started with the translation process, I was not aware of the difference. It kind of came as we went, and especially the more languages we added, the more we realized the importance of it. Very specific example for me is when we were looking at offering Canadian French, and that is a market where, yes, you have the Canadian English, but you also have the Canadian French, and we already had French as a language, but it was very important to know, and this is where our sales team, for example, came in to help us understand the importance of differentiating between the European French and the Canadian French, and how the country is really takes pride in the differences. And just to be aware of that, I think really helps to understand what it is you're doing and how important it is to be aware of those small, but in the end, bigger changes for the customer. So when we started, we had English and German for our customers that we're serving here in Germany, and developers for our English for our developers. And yeah, we kind of added a few more languages, and it kind of went from there. Now we're over 17 languages, actually. To think about that is really, really amazing to see how far we've been able to come. But I think what really helped with that in the beginning, to answer your question again, is that we are a small international company to begin with. So we have a lot of employees. Our team is super diverse, and we have so many different languages and people from different countries to begin with, and everyone has contributed to building our product. They all want to identify with that, and so it was very clear to us from the beginning that that is something we want to offer our customers as well, to experience the product in their preferred language.
I'm going to go back to the concept of localization culture now. And Michal, I don't know if you can summarize a little bit, what does it mean to create a localization culture within a company? Because it sounds very open. I don't know if you can just walk us through it.
I think actually what Kelly said is a very accurate definition of that, because it starts with all your entire team, or as much of your team as possible, being aware of the value in localization, of the importance of it, and also being aware of what it takes. So the more knowledge you share, the more everybody understands how important it is to create experiences for everybody that are as good as they can be for everybody, then they're willing to put in the effort to make that happen. And they're also aware of it as they work. So it kind of stays in their mind. And when they make decisions, when they take part in discussions, they have that in their mind. And so a lot of the times when you have a very international company and a lot of people within that company speak a second language and have experiences using products that are not in their source language, and kind of know what a good experience looks versus what a bad localized experience looks, that's a very good foundation for creating that localization culture. You don't have to have it, of course, but it's a good starting point, because you already have that awareness. Otherwise, you have to create that awareness within your team, which you can definitely do. But the biggest thing is that you want everybody to be aware, both of the importance of it and then what it takes to make that happen, and just generally keep it in mind as they work. And I don't know if you want me to go into kind of the how yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, if someone is starting from scratch, imagine a lonely localization manager in a company that doesn't have any support right now and needs to create the awareness about localization within the team. What should they do to just start off and convince their colleagues that this is important?
When you're one person, it is really hard because you, of course, want to create that awareness. And if your team does not have that awareness to begin with, which happens all the time, then when you're just one person, you can be on all the meetings, right? You can't be in every department when they make every decision. But you still want them to have localization in mind. You still want them to keep localization at the discussion table, even if you're not there. And the methods vary if you're a bigger team or if you're just one person. So if you're just one person, then you have to create your own, ambassadors for that. And so you do that through training and conversations and discussions and I don't know, maybe workshops that you do with your team, depending on how the company's built. But the more you talk to people about localization and you show them examples of good and bad, examples of the value of it, you show them kind of, this is an effort that we did and this is the impact that it had on our customers or on the feedback that we got and stuff like that. Then the more people are convinced and they continue to think about it later. And because you can't be everywhere at once, sharing that knowledge and having a place to discuss this with maybe team leads or a manager, depending on how the company is built, then that on its own can be really helpful in starting the foundation for that localization culture. And what I have heard from a lot of people that I spoke to in the past is that a lot of the times when you start doing that, people kind of start to get excited about the different people within the different departments. There's always one person who finds this more interesting than others. And he's like, or she's like, oh, yeah, I want to make that happen more. And then they become your ambassadors. A lot of times it's people who do speak a different language, immigrants, people who have experience with poorly localized content or are just excited about words or content or anything else. So they could come into this from different angles. But there are people who would find this more interesting than others and they would want to pitch in. They would want to be part of it, especially if you offer it to them. To tell them, I'm looking for people like you. I'm looking for people to participate in my international program or localization program. So they'd want to be part of it. And that could really help you amplify your influence.
So basically finding allies in your team, right?
Definitely.
Kelly, how was your experience with this? Because as far as I know, Pentland Firth hadn't implemented any localization before. And how was the process? Was it hard to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, at first I wasn't really aware of the difference between translation and localization, and it came as we went. And the more languages we added in the system, the more we noticed, or I noticed at the end when I was doing the translations, how important some small changes are. Before we found Localazy, we were working with Visual Studio Code actually, and I'm not a developer, so for me this was all new and I had to learn a few things and what to watch out for. And kind of how it worked was that either our developers provided me with a file or I downloaded it myself and implemented it in there. And then I had to check and compare what's new, what are some changes, where do I need to translate, and be very careful and sure that I'm aware of what I'm doing, what I'm translating, and that I actually understand the context. So it is, for me, very helpful that I work right here. I am aware of our product. I know it inside out. Like I know it very well. So a lot of times when I see a certain string that I'm supposed to translate, I know where I can find it on the user interface at the end of the day. But sometimes it was a little tricky to do that. So one example for me is we have a navigation system in the Easy Shopper, so you can find a product you're looking for, because sometimes you just don't know, even if you're in your standard supermarket, you don't know where that one specific item is, and you can look for it and you can get navigated to the item in the store. And I'm aware of that function, and still when I used the English translation, it was kind of out of context for me. Your item is 3 meters away, it was supposed to say, but from the German translation, out of context, I just used the word removed, because away or removed, it's kind of the same word in German. And I used the wrong word, and then when I saw it on the display, I was like, that makes no sense at all. I need to change this. So it was a lot of trial and error, seeing what I'm translating and where it is found in the code, and yeah, kind of going from there. And that's why, actually, not to take anything away from the questions later, but this is why I'm very thankful and helpful that we found Localazy, because the whole process is so much easier. We can add, items in the dictionary and know what is found where. and what to translate and get certain AI suggestions, which is super helpful. So yeah, we've come a long way. But to go back to the question, in the beginning, it was a little tricky to get everyone on board with this because I was kind of a one-person team doing the translations, and now there's more of us. As I mentioned, we're a pretty international company, and I thought, why not use those resources because we have a lot of people who are native speakers. And so sometimes for me, it could be tricky, even with the help of Google Translate or whatever, to get really the right translation versus a person who knows that language and really speaks it and translates it, adds a little extra benefit to that. So yeah, we've come a long way and it's a lot easier now, but in the beginning it was a little challenging.
Of course, sounds like it. Michal, I wanted to ask you, what are the most common errors that companies incur in when they are trying to foster this kind of culture, when they are starting out with localization?
Generally, what a lot of companies do is they kind of slap on localization after. So they already have a product and they've already launched it in a market, and then someone says in a meeting, oh yeah, let's add another language or let's start localizing, see how it works. And so they say, okay, let's take everything we have and just translate that and send it to an agency or whatever, and we'll be good, and we'll see if that works. So we'll continue doing localization because that's how you do it. And then what happens is those who actually take care of that translation, and that could be the translators who are actually writing the content, but also everyone else who's kind of facilitating it, they're very, very separated from the process itself. They're very separated from the product. They're not aware of really, really key important information like what's the voice of the product, what the brand even is, who are the users, what they expect, how is it going to look in the wild, in a supermarket maybe. They don't have that information, and they're a lot of times not given that information. And that separation leads to the fact that translations are obviously not as good, the experience is not as good. And then people are like, oh yeah, but this agency is not good, or well, we can't really translate, or there's no way to get good translations. So they get that discouraged by the fact that it's not working through that method, and they don't want to continue. Or they're just willing to settle for very poor experiences because they say this is how it is. There's no way to get good translations. And that is an error that I see a lot. Having that separation or not investing enough in bringing those two sides together, even if they are external vendors, contractors, you can still get them in a meeting and explain to them and show them the product. You can kind of invest in them so they can invest in you. When you put in that effort, then you get obviously better results in return.
Makes complete sense. I was wondering, how did this go with Pentland Firth, Kelly? Did you commit any of these errors, and how did you actually manage the process, the difficulties you encountered?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think being aware of the context, so really knowing the product, and as you mentioned, Michal, that's something that we've experienced with another translation company before. I always wanted to make sure that I send them in a video. This is our product. This is how it works. This is what you're supposed to translate, to kind of really give them an understanding of what the software is referring to. Because without the context, how are you really supposed to know? I'm pretty sure every language has words that have multiple meanings or can be translated a certain way. And I see this in a few languages that we have. A lot of times we use the word cart for shopping cart. And if you're not careful, or if you don't make the translator aware of it, it can be translated into words like a wagon or a car or something like that. So you really want to make sure that you let the translator know what specific context it is used in and what words maybe don't get translated. For example, easy shopper, like don't translate any of those words or certain other brands that we have. So I think just that is really the main thing. The biggest struggles in the beginning is to not take phrases or words as they are out of context and just translate them to the best you think, but really understanding what it is used for in order to translate it properly.
That is indeed a common case study and a common situation where people realize how localization is important on the field. I was wondering, Michal, apart from Kelly's case, do you have any case studies worth mentioning, situations and businesses you've advised that have encountered a series of benefits when they turn their heads to localization and foster that kind of culture?
Yeah, actually, one of the biggest problems with kind of showing the value of localization or showing the value of effort is that a lot of companies don't measure the localized product as much as they do the source or original product. So a lot of the testing is being done on the source product, And then when you get it out to localized markets, you don't do this same granular testing as you would. So you don't really know that this effort that I made actually made that specific impact. So it's really hard to get numbers. But I have interviewed a few months ago Gilad El-Musnino, who was part of the international program in Microsoft for a lot of years. And he told me something that was really interesting. They had a program that's very similar to what we talked about, where people from the international program started working and mentoring people from other departments in the company. And they would work together. So if you had to do like a review of the localized product, then they would do that together. If you had to go over bugs and just prioritize the bugs, they would do that together as well. So they would get kind of the value and the information, the knowledge from that person who's part of the international program, but also the influence and the impact of that person from the other department. And that made a huge difference for them. I actually have numbers to tell you about. So they saw about a 20% decrease in bug lifecycle. So any bugs that they would get international bugs, they would actually disappear much quicker. So it would be much easier to take care of them because they had the knowledge from both ends of this both endeavor, and so it could really solve things much quicker. But it also had just fewer bugs in general. So the product was better for its users than it would have been if they hadn't done that. And those are just two examples that he told me. So definitely there are kind of measurable benefits. Not a lot of companies do measure them. And so I do want to take that minute to encourage anyone who's listening to this to measure the benefit, to measure your localized product as well, and not just the source product, and try and actually get real data from users in different markets to see how different maybe efforts that you made or changes that you made to the process actually influence the quality of the result. Just so you can have those numbers so you can say, oh yeah, look, our efforts are paying off or not paying off, and then maybe we should do something different. It's much easier when you have the numbers. But I do have that one case study, which I hope it helped.
Yeah, it does. It is, as you say, it is actually difficult to measure the ROI of any localization effort. And in the end, you have to find your own way to see how it's impacting your users. Kelly, I don't know if you had an experience with user metrics regarding localization.
Yeah, as Michal also mentioned, it's kind of tricky to measure that specifically. But I think just the fact that we're constantly adding new, I actually just ordered a new language yesterday. So this is going to be number 18. The fact that we're constantly adding new languages already speaks volumes. And even if it cannot be measured in numbers like that, seeing the success of our product, we're currently in over 187 stores. We're over 7,200 carts on the shop floor, and we've had over 31.7 million sessions with the Easy Shopper. And I think that is a success in and of itself, knowing that every single part, including the localization of it, including offering customers this experience, everyday task in their own preferred language that they choose to pick, that contributes to that success. That is part of that success. And I think that's something you can kind of measure it in. And that's really, really cool to see, because management expectations is always, we want to add something, and how fast can we do this? How can we measure it? How can we perform? And I think we do see it mirrored in the numbers that I just mentioned. And personally, I'm always a big fan of offering languages, because I just love the diversity of having different languages and that they have to offer. And every language just brings its own little special thing with it. And why not offer that to your customers to make their experience even better?
Agree. Kelly and Michal, I wanted to just go through the last questions with you. Basically, I was wondering if you have any tips for companies who are thinking of localizing and are not sure how to involve their teams and create this culture. So, Michal, can you first tell us something from your experience and the companies you've helped?
Yeah. So from what I saw and told you at the beginning, it all starts with kind of knowledge and familiarity with the topic, with the importance of it. And so that's definitely what I would start with. Maybe a workshop for the team, or something that we talk about, like sit down together and discuss what are the best ways that we can localize, or maybe a course that some of us take and then teach others, or any type of knowledge sharing that we can do to just get everybody interested in localization and what it means for us and how it's going to kind of impact the way that we ship different features in a product. So you start with that, and then you can just base everything else off of that. So once you start with that discussion, you're probably going to get to some kind of a conclusion, like let's start with this one language, two languages, and a pilot and see how it goes. And then you get feedback from people. And once everybody are involved, you can have all that information and you can use it to improve your process. It just improves your results as a result of it. And it all starts with getting those people engaged and interested in the effort.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, do you agree? Do you have any other tips from your experience?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, hearing this, I will make a few notes, and I think this is really great. But for us, what I think would be the biggest tip I would give is in the beginning, as a team, sit together and really look and research what kind of platforms are there to assist you. What is something that we want to use that would work best as a team? That was the biggest thing for us because we have not always used Localazy, and finding it has really added a tremendous benefit to us as a company because it's a lot more efficient. And to get there, it took a little bit. That's what I think I would give that piece of advice, to just really research what platforms are there and what would be best for your solution and for your team, that you can all work together. Because I'm the one looking into translating it. Our developers are adding it, and our testers also need to kind of see and what is the context here, what can I use, how does that work, so make sure you have a tool that works best for everyone.
We're happy you enjoy it. Having a good TMS or a CAT tool or whatever you want to use to manage your translations, aside from your team and the translators you use, it's critical. You can just automate some processes and find ways to make the process easier to manage. And of course, you want everyone to be involved. So a good system is always a good way to get everyone on board. So we've come to the end of the conversation. We're very happy to have you here, Michal and Kelly. Lastly, I would like you to just let us know, first, Kelly, where can we find more information about Easy Shopper and Pentland Firth and basically what you do?
Yeah, so we have two websites for the company and for the product itself. One's pentlandfirthsoftware.com, the other one's easy-shopper.com. So you can find most of the information on those websites, but we're also on social media for both. It is on Facebook and Instagram, or on LinkedIn. You can find us through Pentland Firth Software, GmbH. So feel free to reach out to us anywhere on those platforms.
Wonderful. Michal, where can we find you? Do you have some courses, some places where we can learn with you?
Yeah, so first of all, there's the site that I mentioned, so it's localization-friendly.com, and there's lots of knowledge, blog posts, and tips and tricks and anything else. We also have a newsletter where sometimes I share additional tips and additional content, either that I wrote or from across the web, that can be helpful for companies localizing. So that would be the first place. And also I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to look me up. We can share knowledge and learn from each other in general. And I do teach a course. I teach a UX writing course for localizers and international content design course. So if you're interested in learning more about how to create good experiences specifically for international audiences, and then that's definitely an option. And I'm around, like I said, on LinkedIn if anyone has any questions.
So that's a wrap. See you on the next episode of Bridging the Gap, and thank you, Kelly and Michal, for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
If you like this episode, please follow our channel and add it to your favorites so you don't miss the next conversation. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for updates and bonus content. Until next time, stay curious!